Betrayal isn't just the pain you feel when the truth comes out. It's a long process that can change a person beyond recognition. And what if revenge isn't what we think it is? What if revenge isn't destruction, but the path to restoring your own honor and dignity? This is the story of a man who faced betrayal and chose to find his way not through ruining another's life, but by regaining control over his own. Henry's story is about how far a person will go to reclaim their truth. But the question that will always linger, does revenge ever bring satisfaction, or does it only leave a hollow aftermath? Henry was no longer young, but his life seemed stable. At 60, he found comfort in routine work, home, family. He had been married to Laura for almost 35 years. It wasn't an ideal marriage, but it was enough. He believed that together they could overcome any difficulties. However, everything changed that evening. When Henry returned home from work, he immediately noticed that something was off. Laura was drunk, her face red from tears. She could barely stand, struggling to get the words out. He wanted to approach and support her, but she stopped him. "Henry, I can't keep hiding it," she said, losing control of herself. "I need more from you. You never see me as I am. You think everything's fine, but it's not. And I can't stop talking to other men." Henry stood frozen, unable to comprehend what was happening. He knew their marriage had issues, but this confession struck him to the core. Laura continued, "I'm seeing someone else. We understand each other in ways you never could." Henry felt his world crumbling. He couldn't believe it. All the years they'd spent together suddenly felt like a lie. He didn't know how to react. His emotions were a confusing mix of rage and pain. He had no idea what to do with this truth, and no idea how to move forward. Choking on his bitterness, he stepped toward her and said quietly, "You betrayed me, Laura. I can't believe you're telling me this." But she merely brushed him off, as if it didn't matter. That moment became a turning point for Henry, the moment when everything he knew and believed was thrown into doubt. After Laura left, Henry found himself alone in the empty house, surrounded by memories that now seemed distant and false. Everything he thought he knew about their life together, about their marriage, was now in question. He couldn't just forget, he couldn't just let it go. He needed answers. He needed to understand. Days passed, and Henry became consumed with one thing: finding the truth. He wasn't ready to forgive or forget, not yet. He started tracking Laura's every move, checking her social media, asking mutual acquaintances about her new life. What he discovered shocked him. Laura wasn't just seeing someone else, she was seeing a man from her workplace, Mark. Henry found out they had been spending more and more time together, meeting for lunch, chatting late into the night. Each piece of information felt like another stab to his heart. Henry, who had once trusted his wife without question, now saw her through a different lens. She had betrayed him, and that betrayal wasn't just physical, it was emotional. She had been hiding a whole life from him. He wasn't sure what to do next, but one thing was certain: he couldn't let her just walk away from all of this without facing the consequences. The thought of revenge took root in his mind. He wanted to make her realize the gravity of what she had done, but more than that, he wanted her to feel the same pain that had torn him apart. He began plotting, making a plan that would bring the truth into the light. It wasn't enough just to know, he wanted everyone else to know too. Henry spent days meticulously planning his next move. He knew that revenge couldn't be rushed. It needed to be precise. Every detail had to be perfect. He didn't just want to expose Laura, he wanted to make her feel the weight of her actions, to show her that she couldn't just walk away unscathed. He started with the people in her life, friends, colleagues, anyone who had been close to her. Henry knew that if he could make this public, if he could show everyone the betrayal that Laura had so carefully hidden, then maybe, just maybe, he would feel that sense of justice he so desperately needed. His opportunity came one evening when Laura hosted a dinner party at their home. It was meant to be a simple gathering, but for Henry it became the perfect setting to reveal the truth. He knew she was planning to invite Mark, and that's when everything fell into place. Henry had prepared everything in advance. He had gathered the messages, the photos, the evidence he needed to show the world who Laura truly was. As the evening progressed and their guests laughed and chatted, Henry quietly took the reins. He stood up, silencing the room. Everyone's attention turned to him, and Laura froze, realizing too late that she was no longer in control. Henry didn't waste any time. With a calm yet firm voice, he spoke the words that would change everything. "I think it's time everyone knew the truth about Laura," he said, as the projector screen lit up behind him, displaying photos and text messages between Laura and Mark. The room was silent, as the reality of what was happening set in. Laura tried to interrupt, to defend herself, but her words were drowned out by the growing murmurs of disbelief from their friends and family. For Henry, it wasn't just about exposing Laura, it was about reclaiming the respect he had lost. He wanted her to feel the humiliation, the same sense of betrayal that had torn him apart. But as the evening unfolded, something unexpected happened. The satisfaction Henry had anticipated was replaced by a deep sense of emptiness. The anger, the hurt, everything that had driven him to this point suddenly seemed insignificant. He had gotten his revenge, but now he wasn't sure it was worth it. The pain didn't go away, it only seemed to multiply. And in that moment, Henry realized something important: revenge, no matter how sweet it may seem, doesn't fill the void. It only deepens the wound. The night ended in silence, and Henry knew that while Laura's secret was now out, the real battle had only just begun. The days that followed the dinner party were eerily quiet. The people who had once been part of their life together now looked at Henry with pity, and Laura disappeared from his world altogether. She no longer answered his calls, and the house felt emptier than ever before. The truth had been exposed, but it didn't bring the sense of closure Henry had been desperately seeking. At first, he tried to convince himself that everything was better now. He had made Laura face the consequences of her actions. But in the silence that followed, Henry realized that what he'd done hadn't healed him. It hadn't brought him peace. For weeks, he walked through his days with a sense of loss that he couldn't shake. The house felt foreign. The memories that once brought him comfort now only reminded him of the betrayal. He'd hoped that exposing Laura would allow him to move on, but instead it seemed to anchor him to the past, to the pain of what had happened. As the days wore on, Henry began to question everything. He had wanted justice, but what he got was regret. The feelings of anger and revenge that had once fueled him now seemed futile. He had exposed the truth, but it hadn't brought him the satisfaction he'd hoped for. Instead, it had left him with a gnawing emptiness, a reminder that no amount of revenge could ever undo the damage that had been done. One evening, Henry sat alone in his living room, staring at the walls that had once been filled with the sound of laughter and love. He thought about all the years he had spent trying to fix things, trying to make his marriage work. He thought about Laura, about the love he had once felt for her, and he realized that revenge hadn't just ruined his relationship with her, it had also ruined his relationship with himself. For the first time in months, Henry allowed himself to feel the full weight of what had happened. He had lost not just Laura, but a part of himself in the process. And the more he thought about it, the more he understood that the only way forward was to let go, not just of Laura, but of the anger and resentment that had consumed him. Revenge had taken everything from him. It had taken his peace, his dignity, and his future. And now Henry had to make the hardest decision of all to forgive, not just Laura, but himself. Only then could he begin to heal. It wasn't easy, and it wouldn't happen overnight, but in that moment, Henry made a vow to himself. He would no longer let the past define him. The future, however uncertain, was his to shape. And so, with a heavy heart but a newfound clarity, Henry took the first step toward healing. It wasn't the path he had expected, but it was the only one that could truly lead him out of the darkness. Weeks passed, and as the shock of Laura's betrayal slowly began to fade, Henry found himself at a crossroads. The weight of his past decisions hung over him like a dark cloud, but he also recognized something important. He could either keep holding on to the pain and anger, or he could choose to move forward. At first, it seemed impossible. How could he forgive someone who had so deeply hurt him? How could he forgive himself for the things he'd done in the name of revenge? But as time went on, Henry began to understand that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting. It was about letting go of the hold that bitterness and regret had on his heart. He started by taking small steps, focusing on his work, reconnecting with old friends, finding new hobbies. The act of rebuilding his life was slow, but it was progress. He learned to enjoy the small things again, like morning walks or a quiet cup of coffee in the corner of his kitchen. Slowly but surely, he started to feel a sense of peace that had eluded him for months. But healing wasn't just about moving forward, it was also about understanding the lessons he had learned. Henry had always prided himself on being a man of integrity, but his pursuit of revenge had shown him a side of himself that he wasn't proud of. He realized that, in his quest for justice, he had lost sight of what truly mattered: his own sense of self-worth. One evening, as he sat alone in his living room, Henry thought about the lessons he had learned. Revenge had only deepened his pain. It had destroyed his marriage and left him with a feeling of emptiness. But in forgiving himself and letting go of his anger, he had started to rebuild the pieces of his life that he had lost. He wasn't ready to forget what had happened with Laura, but he had come to accept that holding on to the past wouldn't bring him the peace he sought. It was time to move forward, not with anger, but with the wisdom he had gained from his experience. Henry didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of hope. He was no longer defined by the pain of his past or the need for revenge. He was free to shape his future, whatever it may be. And so, as the days passed and the seasons changed, Henry began to live again. It wasn't the life he had once imagined, but it was his life. A life that he had fought to rebuild. A life that was no longer ruled by the shadows of the past. Months passed, and the weight that had once consumed Henry's every thought began to lift. He had taken the time to rebuild, to rediscover who he was outside of the pain and betrayal. The days had become less about looking back and more about creating something new, something he could call his own. One afternoon, Henry received a letter. It was from Laura. His first instinct was to toss it aside. to ignore it as he had done with so many things that reminded him of the past. But something inside him paused. He wasn't the same man he'd been when the letter arrived. He had changed. Maybe it was time to face what had been left unfinished. With a deep breath, he opened the envelope and read the words that had been written in a hand he once knew so well. Henry, I don't expect forgiveness, and I don't think I have any right to ask for it. But I want you to know that I am sorry. I have thought about you every day since I left, and I've realized how much damage I caused. I hurt you in ways I can never undo, and I am deeply sorry for that. I can't change the past, but I hope you find peace. I hope that one day you can remember the good times we shared without the pain that followed. You deserve happiness, Henry. I just wanted you to know that. Take care. Laura. The letter sat in his hands for a long time. Henry felt a mixture of emotions. He wasn't sure if he could ever forgive Laura for everything that had happened, but there was a part of him that recognized the courage it took for her to write those words. It wasn't the resolution he had imagined, but perhaps it was enough. He folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. It wasn't a symbol of closure or forgiveness. It was simply a reminder that the past, while painful, had shaped who he was today. And while he couldn't change what had happened, he now understood that his future was still his to define. Henry went for a walk that evening, the cool air brushing against his face as he walked down a path that seemed unfamiliar yet comforting. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel weighed down by the past. He felt free. There were still days when he thought about Laura, when the memories of their life together would resurface. But they no longer had the same hold over him. He had learned to let go, to forgive himself for his mistakes, and to find strength in moving forward. And as the sun set, painting the sky with vibrant colors, Henry realized that this was his new beginning. The past would always be a part of him, but it no longer defined him. The future, filled with endless possibilities, was waiting for him. And for the first time in a long time, Henry felt ready to embrace it. Dear viewers, what would you do in Henry's shoes? Can true forgiveness be found after betrayal has shattered your life? Or does revenge truly bring justice? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your perspective. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more thought-provoking videos. Share this with your friends so they can dive into these emotional and compelling stories too. See you soon.